thinking that not only do we need to be cognizant of what we're doing, but we also need to be cognizant of when we're doing it. So that's why, again, I think that Moses put the reminder to take a rest, follow in God's footsteps before the building of the Mishkan. But really, when I even got to thinking about it more, I realized that there's probably 3 important lessons about the structure of when this was given to the Israelites. Why would Moses pause before describing in detail the creation of the Mishkan? What does it even mean? And I think, again, like I said, it teaches 3 principles. The first is prioritization, that Moses wanted to make sure that the Israelites were taking Shabbat as a significant priority, taking a day of rest. Second, the concept of the boundaries around creativity. What does it mean that we have to rest before we are engaging in creative works and labor? And third, ethical production. How are we doing the things that we are even doing? Let's take a moment to dive into all 3. So the prioritization of Shabbat, the idea, the concept of rest got me thinking about something amazing. There are people who I think are even more productive CEOs because they actually rest and they take their sleep seriously. Anybody know who they are? Jeff Bezos emphasizes the importance of getting enough sleep. Arianna Huffington became a sleep advocate. Winston Churchill would famously nap in the afternoons almost every single day, as does Bill Gates, who often says that sleeping and resting helps him solve his deepest problems. What's remarkable about modern science is that it confirms what these CEOs have already figured out, what our tradition already emphasizes, and that's that taking a short nap, somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes, can improve alertness, problem solving, decision making, memory, consolidation, and overall productivity. Our tradition is not an anti-work tradition or anti-creation, quite the opposite. It's arguing that human creativity thrives as a reflection of divine creativity, that we are just able to create exactly the way that God did by taking a moment to reflect, recalibrate, and enjoy our 20-minute power naps. Let's think about the second principle, boundaries around creativity. There are 39 distinct categories of work that we are prohibited from doing on Shabbat. Anybody have any idea what they are? Or did you realize that there were 39 different distinct types of work that could be done? Okay, so how they most relate to creativity, or the ones that I think do, are writing, drawing, and building are all prohibited. Creating new material objects or permanent marks are prohibited. And digital and electronic devices aren't permitted. That's not in the Torah, but that's really has to do with fire and electricity. Not great. So in that limitation, our people have striven forward with unique ways of telling story, developed an entire oral tradition, had intellectual discussions that would flourish on Shabbatot and at the Shabbos table. It is a paradox, I think, that one of the most limiting things, the idea that you're taking a break one day a week, also allowed for creativity. The idea that sometimes things need to have boundaries around them. Like, let's think about a haiku. It is very strict in what it requires, and yet in that form of poetry, amazing things can be found. Perhaps sometimes a limited palette for a painter can force them into painting something a little bit more unique because they actually have to use their creative mind in an entirely different way. These boundaries reflect Judaism's understanding that creativity is a divine gift, and that mirrors God's creative power. But unlike God, who has unlimited power and therefore unlimited creativity, human creativity offers best within that ethical framework. which brings me to the third point, the heart of Jewish ethics, how we do things, how we think of ourselves. This principle that we do something matters as much as what we are actually accomplishing. And it appears throughout our tradition, meaning the process is just as important as the product. Let me share two different stories. One is of Rabbi Israel Salanter, who was a very famous rabbi in Vilna in 1848. He made a controversial decision regarding ethical priorities on Yom Kippur. He publicly ate food from the pulpit during services. He encouraged others to do the same thing, and he canceled lengthy prayers to prevent people from being in crowded conditions. Why would he do such radicalness? Because there was a cholera epidemic, and he was most concerned that we should live by the commandments, not die by them. And therefore, he decided to violate halakha to save his community. There was an ethical understanding of life as a priority over anything and everything else. What imagination, in a way, it took, what courage it took on the holiest of days in front of his entire community to stand and eat food. He understood the observance must never override, that life is sanctified. As if that wasn't enough, let me share a different story from a different rabbi, just about 100 years before the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, who revolutionized Jewish practice by focusing on kavanah, the spiritual intent behind the religious observance. And he tells the story very famously of a shepherd boy who came in on Yom Kippur, and he didn't know the prayer, so he stood in the back of the synagogue saying the alphabet, Aleph, Bet, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, and so forth, to a tune that only he knew. And when asked what he was doing and why he was there doing this, he said, I'm here to pray, but I don't know how to read, and so God's going to have to string my prayers, my letters together. And he said it with such complete devotion that the Baal Shem Tov supported him in all that he was doing. Another teaching that he offers is that when someone prays without kavanah, those angels cannot carry those prayers to heaven. They are weightless and lacking substance and genuine emotion. His emphasis on kavanah represents a significant shift in the time that he was active as a rabbi and focuses less on the technical precision of the prayers and more on the intent behind them. This wisdom again speaks directly, I believe, into our modern life. How do we focus only on the outcomes alone, failing to consider the means by which we achieve those same outcomes? How often do we judge success solely by external measurements rather than the integrity of our process? As we conclude, I invite us to reflect on these three different principles: the sacred rhythm of work and rest, the creative power of boundaries, and the ethical imperative for how we create matters just as much as what we create. In our fast living, fast-paced, productivity-obsessed world, these ancient teachings feel more relevant than ever and remind us that true creativity flourishes not in boundless freedom, but in the sacred dance between structure and inspiration, between effort and rest, between technical skills and heartfelt intentions. May we find the courage to pause in our important work for the necessary rest that we so need, to embrace the creative power of ethical boundaries, to remember that the means by which we create are as sacred as our creations themselves. Shabbat Shalom.